Today, we're solving it. From the economy to the metagame. Welcome to Marvel Snap Hot Takes. Tournament packs don't fix the new player experience. Now, the tournament pack is the closest Marvel Snap has gotten to actually letting you go out and get a good deck off the rip. Now, this is the pack that was built around the deck that won the Snowball Showdown. It's been sitting in the shop for about a week now. It's a pretty okay thing, but I think there is a fundamental issue with how the pack is priced and set up, which is that a lot of the cards in the deck are Series 3 and below. But the pack itself, each roll on it costs about 4,000 tokens, and that's quite a lot, even though there are some great Series 5 hits. The way the pack is set up, the fundamental advice I would give to anyone asking if they should buy the pack is don't buy it unless you've completed Series 3. But that's backwards, right? Shouldn't the packs that are meant to disseminate decks to people be better for the people who are below Series 3 rather than worse? Like in another card game, when you go out and you buy a precon, maybe you own most of the cards in the precon already, but a new player wouldn't, so it's all additive. But the way this is set up, the way Marvel Snap's system is set up, what it actually does is mostly make all the cards in there that aren't Series 5 into like booby prizes, effectively. Like you open one and you're like, oh man, this sucks. And while it is cool that you can go ahead and get all these cards, the targeting is a reasonable upside. The only way you can actually say that it's a good deal is if you can open every card in the pack, which is something like 40,000 tokens, and nobody who's in the position that they would need to be in where they need one deck has 40,000 tokens to blow. So it's like the whole premise of this to me is supposed to be we want to get players that are early in the game an on-ramp into the content like rotation of the late game. We want someone who is collection level 500 to be able to like get a deck and start seriously playing the game. We want to on-ramp those players earlier, and that's important. And I don't think this product succeeds at that. What it actually succeeds at being is a way for players who are later in the game to target a couple of Series 5s that they specifically are looking to get. And I think that that's better than anything else we have. But in the view of like what this pack is supposed to be, what precons are supposed to be for new players, I don't think it succeeds as a product in doing that. I think if you are telling anyone who doesn't have 40,000 tokens or isn't Series 3 complete not to buy this product, it is probably a product failure, not an advice failure. And I think that is largely my takeaway from this, is like directionally, it's closer than anything they've done, but it's still very far off from being something that is actually meaningfully changing how new players interact with the game. And I would really like there to be a way for a new player who is new to the game and doesn't have 40,000 tokens and hasn't finished Series 3 to be like, I'm getting a good deal, a really good deal on a competitive deck that I will be able to play. That would be the ideal here. Like, Magic has not just starter decks, but they have like these upgraded starter decks that are like $50 or whatever, which are pretty close to meta decks a lot of the time, even though they're not always like the single best deck in the game or things of that nature. They're just like, this is a playable list, right? I think that's kind of what I would want this product to be. And instead, it ends up being, due to the nature of the way the Marvel Snap economy is set up, the kind of thing that actually seems to help more enfranchised players rather than less enfranchised players, which is the exact opposite of who the product, in my opinion, should be for. Revert Professor X. I've, for some reason, seen this take a lot. I think it's honestly a really bad take. I think that for people complaining about the current metagame is at the very least a numbers problem, right? The current metagame is there's a thing that's really big. Professor X is the opposite of a numbers problem. Professor X is a card that comes down, does something that is fundamentally uninteractable, and then enables you to also play Cannonball as a sort of infinitely large guy to win another lane. I do agree that it's very possible that Professor X was hard done by Cannonball existing. It is, on the other hand, totally impossible for me to separate them in my mind. I don't think you can revert Professor X as long as Cannonball exists in his current form, because that play pattern is, frankly, ridiculous. Even if you could, I'd be pretty suspicious of doing it, because we've done so many things to the ramp archetype recently. Like, I don't think people appreciate how much better Professor X is if it is played on turn 4, and also how much better ramp has gotten since the last time Professor X was a card that did what it used to do. That would be a very scary thing. Oh, look, I'm playing a ramp Professor X with Cannonball and Fin Fang Foom. Good luck, buddy. Like, that stuff is really horrifying. To me, the best bits of Marvel Snap are the dynamism of the fact that because there are locations involved in the game, the deck with lower points can usually beat the deck with more points. Professor X is a card that takes that dynamism out of it in a way that is awful for games being interesting. I do not like the card, but fundamentally, it is not just that I do not like the card, there is actually just a fundamental balance issue with having that card exist as long as Cannonball does, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was a fundamental balance issue in having that card exist, just like, period. I think that having the counterplay built into Professor X, that you can move stuff in there, is quite important. Not just for Cannonball reasons, but for making it feel less oppressive. When you lose to something, you want to be able to think, there was something I could have done about this. I could have played a move card. I could have done that. There is a solution that I can introduce in deck building. That is a good thing. When you have a really powerful effect, having an out to it is smart. That makes people feel smart for building their decks to have an out to it. It's good. And I think that largely Professor X is in a much healthier and better state right now than he would be if he were reverted. Specific variant bundles. Every variant should rotate into the golden token store. There should be on a fixed rotation where every variant is going to show one time for that entire cycle of variants, then it restarts again. While I do think that it would be nice if I saw more variants, I don't think this makes any actual sense because, A, I'm not 100% sure that isn't pretty close to how it's done now. Like, I've seen repeat variants, but it's pretty rare. B, imagine you miss a variant and you're like, oh, I won't see that for a year. People are already expressing like how hard it is with the rotation of the store to get the cards they want. I don't think putting an even bigger pool of cards in the variant shop and making it the same mechanic would be a great idea. My instinct is that for both of those things, my solution would be to add refreshes to the store. So like a little button that refreshes the 9 variants you show once a day or whatever. A little button that refreshes the token shop once a day or whatever. That kind of stuff seems like the direction I would want to go. I imagine there is some monetization and FOMO-based reason why they don't want that to happen. I think that some sort of controlled amount of flipping through stuff would probably be beneficial to them. I think that fully automated, you are going to see everything would probably be a net negative on multiple levels. I think the season pass cards should have never got nerfed. Surfer, Zabu, etc. Instead of nerfing, just indulge in the chaos of those decks and others too. Oh no, the chaos of my deck wasn't enough for your Cannonball Profex chaos. Instead of crying over cards, just enjoy them and use whatever chaos works for you. You see this pitch a lot where, like, every so often in a card game's life cycle, someone will be like, you should just make a mode where all the cards are unnerfed. That would be super fun. And I think the theory is that it'll be like the kind of thing where they all have like relative power level to each other. So it's like, oh, all these cards are unnerfed, but they're all holding each other in check. And typically, I don't think that's actually how it works. Like, Marvel Snap is a game that is simple enough that the things that do the numbers the best are kind of gonna be the things that are the best at doing the game. And so while there is interactivity, the stronger stuff gets, the worse the interactivity gets in a relative sense. As an example, do you remember when Surtur was really good and it was like, oh, I'll play Mobius to prevent them from playing Scar, right? But they're playing 4/10s and you're playing a 3/3. And so you're just going to lose even if you prevent the Scar, right? All the tech in this world is still what it is in the real world, but all the threats are way, 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 way bigger. And so what you get is just numbers, right? If you have a format like this, it's just numbers. And so you end up with a format that I think is probably going to be extremely unpleasant and boring. It's one of those things where it's like, what you think it's going to be like is you think it's gonna be like Jujutsu Kaisen, right? You think it's gonna be like the strongest sorcerer of history versus the strongest sorcerer of today. It's gonna be peak, right? It's not gonna be peak. That's not what it's gonna be like. Like, what's actually gonna happen is they're gonna team up and they're gonna beat the crap out of you, and you're gonna be like, why did I even bother? Like, that's what's actually going to happen. I'd rather season passes release broken as opposed to unplayable. Looking at you, Weapon X, it's more fun when they release a card that's too good as compared to one that's too bad. I basically agree with this. If you listen to the podcast at all, Jerry and I went through the last year of season passes and we're trying to figure out how many of them are better or worse balanced than Show Lao. We came to the conclusion that it was 3 season passes were clearly better in terms of, or clearly stronger, which would make them worse balanced. 1 season pass was probably about on par with Show Lao, so about the same level of balanced. 3 more season passes were clearly just better balanced than Show Lao. They were strong enough without being overpowered. And then the rest of season passes were weaker than Show Lao is strong. That is to say, probably worse designs, worse balance than Show Lao. Which is weird when you think about it, right? Because you look at Show Lao and you're like, well, that just must be like one of the cards they've missed the most on. And I really don't think it is. It's just the card they've missed the most high on in the last 6 months. But people don't notice when they miss low because they're not losing to the card when they miss low, because that's what missing low means. But like, let's say Show Lao has a 55% win rate and their goal win rate is 52%. Well, to me, that implies that a 45% win rate is actually a bigger balance miss if the goal is 52 than a 55 is, right? Again, made up numbers, but you get what I mean, especially in the context of Show Lao and Weapon X, for example. I consider Weapon X a much bigger miss. I would think that they are much more upset about Weapon X than they are about Show Lao, and the reason is because you don't even talk about Weapon X. No one cares. And so, like, it's almost like there wasn't a season pass card. It's like it didn't exist. And I think that's the biggest thing. When they make a card that isn't good, nothing happens. But nobody thinks that's because the card isn't good. They think it's like, oh, it's because of, whatever other balance mistake, right? Weapon X doesn't suck. It's that, like, V-Hand is too good or whatever. The metagame is stale because it's just V-Hand all the time, right? And so you sort of oscillate between the metagame is stale and I can't believe they made this broken card. But what's the alternative? Like, they got to make something that's strong enough to compete, and it can't be too strong, but it's got to be strong enough. It seems like it's a pretty hard needle to thread. That is their job. I'm not going to sit here and act like that isn't their job. I think it's just a bit of a harder ask than people give it credit for. I do think this take is correct. It is better when they release something that is busted versus when they release something that isn't. Obviously, I'd prefer they didn't do either. I think the best season pass they made was Agamotto. That's a card that was just everywhere for a month. Everyone really enjoyed playing it. It was unique. It was fun. People still play it. It's still like an interesting card people have like an appeal factor for, but it's definitely not busted. And I think that that's sort of a good space for a season pass card, or really any card that they make to be in, is to be that kind of card. Obviously, they can't all be 5 cards in one, but I mean, it helps. I think that this kind of thing is indicative of how players typically notice when something goes wrong in a way that impacts them. And the only way for something to go wrong in a way that impacts everyone is for it to be too strong. If it's wrong in a way that is too weak, it, by the definition of too weak, basically doesn't impact anyone, and so it just sort of goes over like a lead balloon. Skills shouldn't be on reveal and should have their own classification of ability type and go off no matter what. I I can't tell if this is an anti-werewolf post or an anti-Cosmo post. I really couldn't tell you. Maybe it's an anti-Sholau post. I don't think that it is. I think that this is probably a bad take because I don't really see what the need for it would be. There are really only a couple of interactions in the game that this is meaningfully impacting, and I kind of just named them off. They're both dogs. I don't understand what the point of this would be. I don't think it would be worth the, let's say, I don't think it would be worth explaining to the player base and the added complexity of it. Like, oh, this is a card that when it reveals, it does something, but it's technically not an on reveal, right? Like, that doesn't seem like it's worth adding into your game to change the interaction between Cosmo, Werewolf, and this. I think that is probably a bad idea, personally. Sauron players shouldn't be just expected to play Nightmare. Before the card release and changes, there were interesting ways to build the card with more fun payoffs, and now you're forced to be subject to Nightmare RNG or running worse cards for less base stats than meta decks. Now, this is Zinade. He is a Sauron one-trick. He asked basically the same question in Ask the Team, and Glenn's response was like, hey, man, have you tried playing another deck? And so I'm going to give him the same response. Hey, man, you could play a different deck. Like, your deck, nothing about your pet deck, and I don't mean this just at Zinade. I mean this kind of at everyone. There is nothing about your pet deck that says it has to be a meta deck. There isn't. Nothing says it's got to be a meta deck. It's allowed to be a worse deck. You're allowed to be a deck that is subject to Nightmare. Nothing in the world says that whatever archetype you have picked as your personality is going to be there forever. You can either, you can live with that or you cannot live with that. And I will say, to Zinade's credit, he's still Sauron's strongest soldier. Like, even though it's a bad deck, he is still the strongest Sauron soldier on Earth. But I do think that there is a real lesson in here. I obviously, I think Zinade knows it and is being a little facetious here. But I for people who aren't this, it's like, if you are someone who has a deck they love, there is no angel up in heaven who is saying, you deserve for your deck to be meta. That's just not how it works. There is no deserve for this. Sauron doesn't deserve to be a meta deck. Sauron doesn't deserve to be what it was 2 years ago. That's not how any of this works. And so this goes out to, like, I respect the hell out of one tricks. I really do. Like, I think it is an incredible skill set. I really respect the sort of innate domain knowledge that these kind of people have. But there's nothing that should entitle them to that specific thing always being the thing they're allowed to do. There's nothing. Like, people think of me as the mid-range pile gamer. They killed every card that I played. 100% of them. Now I'm a ramp guy. Like, that's how it is. They're going to do that. That's going to go away too. That's what metagames do that. Like, that's how it goes, right? And I think that largely what I'm trying to get across here is, if you want to play something specific, you have every right to do it. And if you want to do what you want to do, again, you have every right to do it. But I don't think you should feel entitled to do what you specifically want to do and also win a lot. Why would you get that and no one else would get that? You know what I mean? I think that is sort of where I come down on this. So as much as I do think Zinade is asking facetiously, and as much as I know Zinade, I was actually instructed specifically by Zinade, please don't post the Glenn thing at me. So I didn't, but another butt told me to post the Glenn thing at him. But I do think that this is a real lesson that people should learn, which is like, you have every right to get attached to a deck, but nothing says that deck has to be good. There just isn't a thing that's like that. And if you get yourself lost in, I am this deck person, what you can do is cause yourself to lose out on ever experiencing something else. And that can be bad. And it could be maybe something that holds you back as a player. Make Shang-Chi 3 cost at this point. If everyone is able to run big guys, and there's no deck that can actively slot him in profitably, then it seems like he's not actually serving his design role well. And I feel like Casual's fear of Shang is no worse than SK at this point. Dude, I actually think this is kind of cooking. Like, I know this, on its face, I read this and I was like, that's ridiculous. Shang-Chi 3, but like, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, you know, I really don't play that card. Like, you can probably make him a 3-2. Like, I actually think I kind of wonder about 3-2 Shang-Chi. Like, I don't think I would want to do it because I think largely that Snap has been a better game free of his tyrannical rule. But I do think it's kind of interesting to think about. Like, oh yeah, you probably could do that. I wouldn't want to. I don't think it's a good idea to do. But my original reaction of that's facially ridiculous, I don't know if it is. I think it might actually be a thing you can do. Afflict is in need of some love. Make US Agent -4 again, buff Man-Thing to Afflict -3, give Zabu his point back, revert the Hazmat nerf. I don't know about this one. Afflict, when it's good, is largely good as a mid-range crusher. Like, it's a mid-range deck that crushes other mid-range decks because of some of the cards you mentioned, right? Like US Agent and Man-Thing. But I don't necessarily think that it's a good deck to have around. I think a lot of Afflict is problematic for me, not necessarily because of Afflict, but because of the way Luke Cage functions, where it's just like, Jesus, okay, I don't know what you're supposed to do about this play pattern, but I do know that I hate it, right? I think that Afflict is a deck I personally enjoy quite a bit because, you know, I'm the mid-range guy, right? But we've talked a little bit about killing your darlings here. I think if I zoom out enough that I can look at this with like fairly objective eyes, I think Afflict is probably a deck you don't want being super popular. I think Afflict is probably, I think a card like Man-Thing is probably a card you don't want being super popular. I think a card like US Agent at -4 is probably a card you don't want being super popular. Because what fundamentally those cards are at these changes are just like the biggest stat sticks in the game, right? Like, that's what they are. Those are like a 215 or whatever and a 4 a billion. That's what those cards are. And that's not a great thing to be, but it's a little bit even less of a good thing to be when the interaction for it is you just play Luke Cage. I hate anything that incentivizes that because it's just such a catch-all answer. Like, when you look at even a threat like right now, like Shou Lao, the answers are like varied and temporal. Like, oh, I'm gonna wait until you do your thing and I'm gonna Shadow King you. Or I'm gonna not wait until you do your thing and I am gonna steal the activate from your Scarlet Spider with a Super Adaptoid, or any of those things, right? Luke Cage is the least dynamic gameplay on the planet. So you do something like this, what happens is probably people just play Luke Cage. And that's just like, oh, I lost. I lose. All my cards don't work. And then when they don't play Luke Cage, it's like, oh, I have the biggest mid-range deck in the game. And I think that gets really old really fast. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I've been KMBest. You have been phenomenal. And I will see you in the next one.